Support for WUWM podcasts comes from Johnson Financial Group, helping customers build financial plans around their unique goals for over 55 years. More at johnsonfinancialgroup.com. Johnson Bank and Johnson Wealth, Inc. are Johnson Financial Group companies.
From 89.7 WUWM Milwaukee's NPR, this is Lake Effect. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. Today, we'll tell you about a program that helps get early education teachers into affordable housing in Milwaukee. Then we'll share more about a film showing at the upcoming Milwaukee Film Fest that examines the impact of the oil and gas industry in the U.S.
Some of the people worked for the industry quite proudly, the oil and gas industry, and even they're having these really serious issues with what's happening right now and how much worse it's gotten.
Plus, sturgeon have made it up the Milwaukee River for the first time in 100 years. We'll learn how it was possible and what it means for the historic fish.
They will be able to make it up here to Ozaukee County and hopefully find their native spawning grounds.
All that's coming up on Lake Effect. This is Lake Effect from 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. Thanks for joining us today. WUWM has been addressing barriers to home ownership in Milwaukee and the possible solutions in our series, Keys to Homeownership. One local program is working to make housing more attainable and affordable for early educators. For teachers or childcare providers, the salary can range from $35,000 a year up to about $70,000. Now, I don't have to go into statistics for anyone to recognize that the current inflated housing market makes owning a home extremely difficult for early educators. That's why the Community Development Alliance created the Early Childhood Education Homes program. They build homes on vacant city lots that cost about $105,000 to buy. The goal is not only to improve housing security, but also improve retention and recruitment of Milwaukee teachers and early educators. To learn more about the program, I'm joined now by Teague Whaley-Smith, the Chief Alliance Executive of the Community Development Alliance. He starts by sharing the obstacles teachers can face to owning a home.
I think everybody sees the dramatic effect that housing costs have had across the country, and particularly in great communities here like Milwaukee. And when that happens, when you have a shortage of housing and you have increased demand, the price goes up, and prices have skyrocketed, particularly in the area of rent. We've seen rent, almost go up, 30, 40%, sometimes year by year. So that has a big impact on lower wage earners. And we know that there are so many passionate teachers and early childhood educators that love their careers and want to be working with kids their entire lives. And then all of a sudden their budget changes because they're spending 2 or 3 times more on housing, and they have to make really painful decisions. Do they want to continue in the career that they love and that they've chose, or do they want to be able to house their family? And nobody should have to make that choice.
Right. And the Wisconsin Policy Forum reported that there was almost 10% of teachers that dropped out of the profession entirely. And financial stability is one of the reasons among the many other stressors that teachers face. So when we're talking about how do we weigh rent, mortgage, and the salary of these professionals, what is the average salary of a teacher in Milwaukee compared to the cost of affording a mortgage?
So there's a wide variety of that term teacher. I grew up in a in-home early childhood education facility. My father was what many would call a daycare provider. And salaries for people that are doing this independently in their own homes, or those people that are working and in that classroom with 0 to 3-month-olds, wages can be as low as $14, $15 an hour for some of those folks. You multiply that by 2,000 hours a year, and you get to a salary that's around $30,000. Of course, it can go up from there depending on your experience and what school system you're in, et cetera. But the general principle is that we don't want families spending more than a third of their income on housing, because if they do, they can't afford other quality of life amenities or necessities, including food and clothing and all of those other type of things that people need to spend money on. So if you're at $30,000 a year, what you can afford is about a $100,000 home. And there are very few $100,000 homes on the market in Milwaukee.
In livable shape.
That's right. The ones
Yes.
that you find actually require $100,000 or $200,000 of repair. So our goal was to really get to that price point, and we were able to hit a price point of about $105,000 for each of these homes, so that you have people that are moving from paying $1,200, $1,300 a month in rent into a home of about $900 a month for mortgage and interest.
Yeah, let's get into this program you're talking about and how you kind of came to third of the income category for helping you guys price out this program. So it is the Early Childhood Education Homes program, and it's aiming to help tackle the problem of housing security for educators of all levels. Before we get into some of the specifics, can you share how it first started, and was it modeled after an existing program, either other places in the U.S. or something you wanted to try here in Milwaukee?
So post-COVID, there were several working teams working on different elements of quality of life in Milwaukee, whether it's food security or otherwise. And there's a group working on early child education that noticed that teachers weren't coming back into the classroom after COVID. And if early childhood education teachers were not able to get to the classroom, then that means that we as parents could not get into work because we don't have a place to send our kids. So this is a problem bigger than just the teachers. It's a societal problem that requires societal answers. Initially, the group that was working on this included Nextdoor Foundation, COA, Malika, UCC, Rooted and Rising, and they wanted to work on secure housing. And initially, they only thought rental was possible. And we said, we actually think that if we're serious about long-term stability, we need to focus on homeownership. Rents in Wisconsin, if they just increased by inflation, since the 1950s and 60s, we'd only have about $800 a month in rent. Of course, rents are now averaging $1,200, $1,300 a month. Your mortgage payment stays the same. And so we wanted a homeownership solution. So we partnered with those groups. We partnered with LISC, the Local Initiative Support Corporation. We were able to receive a $5 million grant from the Evers administration for innovation and Department of Workforce Development. Housing is a workforce problem, and it is a workforce solution. So that's how this idea first came about.
Now, when it comes to finding properties, is it a mix of finding ones that can be rehabbed? Are you building from scratch? How are you acquiring the houses that will be used for this program?
So anytime you want to scale something up, you need to have systems. And the problem with rehab is that every rehab is different. Sometimes you need to replace the flooring. Sometimes it's the ceiling. Sometimes it's the roof. Sometimes it's the basement. And we need to preserve as many homes as possible, but it's hard to bring that to scale. However, if you're building new construction housing, you can bring that to scale by building several of the same model of housing that brings costs down for everybody. And we have an incredible opportunity here in Milwaukee that we have 3,000 vacant lots, all of which at one point had a homeowner in a neighborhood. And in the 1960s, those homes got transferred over to one landlord, and then there was a second generation and a fourth generation, and then we're like a seventh generation landlord, each one of them depleting the property of rent and not making an investment, to the point where those eighth, ninth generation landlords, their entire strategy is to buy it with cash, not provide insurance, not pay the taxes, wait for it to be tax foreclosed, and then it's inhabitable and needs to be demolished by the city. And we can repopulate these neighborhoods and bring people back to the neighborhoods that they may have grown up in by building new construction housing on those vacant lots.
So when it comes to all that coordination it takes to acquire the lots and then also, more importantly, build, what kind of partnerships do you have with the city or other businesses or organizations to make these houses?
Housing is at the core of all of our quality of life. Data shows that it impacts education, safety in neighborhoods, employment rates, and overall health. The way you get to that goal of healthy housing is through collective impact. So at the Community Development Alliance, we bring partners together. We don't swing the hammers. We don't provide the direct assistance, but we're sort of quarterback or coach in this example, bringing in all of the teammates necessary to get the projects across the finish line. So that involves funders and philanthropy, and we've had great philanthropy on these efforts, including not only LISC itself and Department of Workforce Development, Wells Fargo, Northwestern Mutual, Zilber Family Foundation, Greater Milwaukee Foundation. All these partners come together to fund the project. But then you need neighborhood organizations to give direction on what type of housing they want in the neighborhoods. And so we have a resident advisory council, and we set up a project team with neighbors that we're building in so that they have input on what homes look like, the deed restrictions that are put on them. They help draft those things. And then you bring in the builders. And so we're very fortunate to have Habitat for Humanity has partnered with Envision Growth and OB and Wabuzer to build homes. Via CDC is building homes. MCC is building homes. And it's just been an incredible partnership of so many partners to come together. And then, of course, educators need to know about the homes. So we've had partnerships with brokers like Don and Colbert that were featured in a recent article, and the early childhood centers themselves to be able to come to the holiday parties to talk about it, to come to the teacher retreats to talk about it. So it really does take a village to build a house.
Absolutely. You mentioned these houses are sold for about $105,000. What's the average cost to get these homes up and ready to sell?
Yeah, so when my grandfather first built his home in the 1950s, it cost about $12,000 to build a single-family home, and the average annual salary was about $6,000. So in our country's history, we've figured out how to build a home for 2 years of the average salary for a lot of Americans, but unfortunately Americans that look like me, white Americans, white families, and built intergenerational wealth. If we had just seen inflation in those costs, similar to we talked about rents, a new home would only cost $100,000 to build, and you wouldn't have this gap. But that's not what has happened in the construction industry. The construction industry has lost the ability to build entry-level homes. They're focused on these very large McMansions, and it doesn't make business sense for somebody to build an entry-level home from beginning to end without massive federal intervention. And so one of the things that we are piloting here is to really illustrate when you do have government intervention what you can do. And so it can cost anywhere between $250,000 to $300,000 to build these homes. It's a really big gap. But you have to understand that a home lasts for 100, 200 years. So it's really 20 families that you're serving over time rather than one. But what's really important is that, I can't afford my grandfather's home. My kids can't afford my grandfather's home. We had this massive federal subsidy in the 1950s and 60s that went to wealth generation for one generation. And then the kids and the grandkids were left on their own, and we've seen that. And so we have a process called Forever Affordable that allows the first family to build equity in the home, but also ensures that that home is sold as an affordable price for future generations.
I'm just going to take a moment to reintroduce you. I'm Lake Effect's Audrey Nowakowski, speaking with Teague Whaley-Smith of the Community Development Alliance Early Childhood Education Homes program. So we're talking a bit about the logistics and what it takes to build these homes, to get them ready for an early educator to then move in and be able to establish housing security and their own life. What's kind of the makeup of these houses? Are they pretty similar?
They are similar in that they are entry-level homes, but there's room for expansion. So let me talk a little bit about Via CDC, a fantastic partner on the south side of Milwaukee that has offered their ability to build homes to every neighborhood. And they have a wonderful process where they go in and talk with the neighbors and the neighborhood organizations to figure out what to build, what can be afforded, et cetera. And one of the things that families said is that they want to be able to expand in the future. They might only need 3 bedrooms now on a first floor, but maybe they want to open up a childhood center, care center, or they want to expand in the future. So what Via CDC did is they actually elevated the basements so that they can be legally occupied as additional space as family grows. So sort of same cost as a traditional home, and not doubling the cost of the home by building out the basement, because that would make it completely unaffordable.
Or adding an egress, like all these expenses that come up when you're trying to make additions to your home.
Yeah, absolutely. So the things that you can't do later are the egress and the plumbing for a bathroom in the basement. Mm-hmm. So you add that cost to the home now, and then the family can build it out later as they go forward. So Via has done a wonderful job. First, I think 18 homes were built by them. All of them sold to early child educators. We do bus tours every spring where anybody can come and look at homes, but we've had specific bus tours specifically for educators and residents in neighborhoods to give us instruction. Beautiful homes, high ceilings coming in, but also very efficient homes. The best thing that you can do for energy efficiency and for cost is to build only what you need. So these homes are about 1,000 to 1,200 square feet on the first floor, and then have a full basement underneath for expansion in the future.
Awesome. So we're talking about the homes and the need that they're filling, but for someone who's a teacher or early educator out there, How do they qualify? How do they learn about the program, and what are the steps to then get them approved?
So we've tried to make the process as simple as possible, but also achievable so that people aren't given false hope. And so the way that the process works is that any educator can go to housingplan.org/ECE, and there is an application process there. And the basic requirement is that you go through homebuyer counseling, because we want to make sure people know what they're getting into. And you have to have a pre-approval letter for about $95,000 to $100,000. Most families get down payment assistance, and that gets taken away from the mortgage that you need. And so that's really all that they need to do in addition to being an early childhood educator. So the money that we raised is for third grade teachers and below. So you have to be actively working for an early childhood education that include public schools, charter schools, independent practitioners that have a home child center. So that's what you need to qualify, but then you also need to go through homebuyer counseling and get that pre-approval letter from a lender.
With this program, the Community Development Alliance sold its first early childhood education home in October of 2024. How many teachers has this program helped so far? Where are you at now?
We're about halfway through. So there are about 20 educators that are in homes right now, and we have another 20 that are hitting the market right now. And there are homes available. We actively want as many educators to take advantage of this opportunity as possible.
What kind of feedback have you heard from the teachers you've housed so far?
You know, it's really been incredible to meet the families that have gotten into these homes and what it has done for them. We have people that have moved from major housing insecurity into a stable home ownership opportunity going forward. And it's less about, what they say, and it's more about the smile on their face. I mean, you can tell when somebody is stressed out about anything, but you can particularly tell when somebody's stressed out about housing. I don't have the patience and tenacity to be in a classroom with 20 kids, and the people that do are really, really special individuals, and we need to make their job as easy as possible. And so if we can take out the stress of housing insecurity, that's what we should all be doing.
It's a major, major factor. You mentioned it'll be about 40 houses total. What kind of growth do you hope to achieve beyond that? Are there plans for more?
So our ability to continue this program requires, major financial resources over multiple generations to do this. And so I think we've illustrated and proven the concept, and now we need the federal government, state government, and other larger government to really step in. The city and the county can't do this by themselves. And so housing has always been a public good. We've known it's been a public good. Again, I mentioned my grandfather. He received major assistance through loan guarantees and the infrastructure that was built to build his home. And we need that same kind of investment. If you look at the federal budget, there's about $200 billion each year spent on housing, and less than 1% is spent on home ownership for the average American. And so we really need to live our values. And if we believe in the American dream, we have to have people step up and say, you know what, this project works. This is a good public investment to go forward. Our goal is to be building 100 homes per year throughout the city. Not all of them will be for educators, but we always hope that a portion of them will be available for educators and other really critical workforce in our communities.
Right, because with 3,000 vacant lots, the possibilities are there, but would you say the main limitations would be the funding and how that looks?
Yeah, the main limitation is funding. So the primary limitation getting to funding is, do we as Americans, do we as Wisconsinites, do we consider housing to be a public good? And if we're serious about that, we need to move away from rental and back to home ownership strategies. There will always be a role for rental. If you look at successful communities, there's about 30% of people that rent, and we should focus on that. But in some of the communities that we're building in, it's 100% rental. There are blocks in the city of Milwaukee that were built for homeowners and home ownership that now have been 100% turned over to landlords. And they're just extracting capital from our neighborhoods. And so we need to say, enough is enough. These homes are for homeowners, and that can be done through policy change. And you see that throughout the country of saying that big corporations can't own, single-family homes. And it's also going to take a public investment. But just to be very clear, that public investment cannot be done by local government by itself. It's going to require the state and federal government to step in.
You're talking about the wider impact of homeownership in communities. And as we're talking specifically about housing for educators, how does it benefit not just them, that this is no longer a major stressor, but their students, wider communities? How is this program making waves and benefiting more than the person who's setting foot in the home?
So there's really great data about the link between homeownership and education. If there are families in stable housing, those families and their kids have 30% higher educational outcomes. That's a major number that we should be conscious of for those working in education otherwise. And the reason is that you constantly have kids that are in families who can afford the first month's rent, maybe the security deposit, but then that's it. And so they're there for a month or two, and then they get evicted. And your teachers talk about this 6-month cycle in the classroom that kids can't focus and they can't stay at work. There's data that also shows the same is true for people that work and for the teachers that are in there. If they are having housing insecurity and they're on that 6-month cycle, how can they possibly focus on the kids in the classroom? And so this is kind of similar of getting on an airplane and that oxygen bag falls down and says, take care of yourself before you help others. We got to take care of the people that take care of our kids. And so if we do that, we are one step closer to achieving that higher quality of life for our entire community.
Well, Teague, I want to thank you so much for joining me today to share more about the Early Childhood Education Homes program. It's great work, and I can't wait to see how it grows.
Thank you so much.
Teague Whaley-Smith is the Chief Alliance Executive of the Community Development Alliance. He was featured in an article about the program in this month's Milwaukee Magazine. You can find more information and learn how to apply for the Early Childhood Education Homes program at wuwm.com. Support for the Seeking Solutions Keys to Homeownership series comes from presenting sponsor Educators Credit Union. You can find all of the stories in the series at wuwm.com/housing. Need some flexibility for when you listen? You can listen to Lake Effect on demand. Just find it as a podcast wherever you like to listen to download and enjoy on the go. In about 15 minutes, we'll tell you how a historic fish has marked a historic moment in local conservation. But first, a Wisconsin native tells us about her film Gaslit and how it sheds light on the impact the oil and gas industry has on people and the environment. Keep listening to Lake Effect on WUWM. You're listening to Lake Effect on Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. The Milwaukee Film Festival is back for the 18th year next week. Among the films featured will be Gaslit. The documentary takes viewers to the heart of the U.S. oil and gas industry, from Texas to Louisiana, to see firsthand how the land, air, water, and human lives are being impacted. Activist and actor Jane Fonda is the executive producer and appears in the film. It was directed by Wisconsin native Katie Camozzi, and she joins WUWM's environmental reporter Susan Bentz to talk about the film.
Tell me, what was your path to filmmaking? Where did this start for you?
Well, it started with a love of movies. Since I was a kid, I've been a cinephile, but yeah, I've always loved movies. I studied it in college, and I've been working on them ever since.
You've been based out of Brooklyn or New York for a while, or is your base sort of everywhere at this point?
I've moved around a bit, but it's been New York for a while. I did move to Washington, D.C. for the Greenpeace job when I started it.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, it's pretty much been New York.
And so has your professional career really been centered around Greenpeace? Is that where the bulk of your body of work thus far has grown and lived?
For the last decade, yes. It's really been around Greenpeace and environmental. But before that, I worked on everything, Susan. I did, made videos for YouTube about designers, about musicians. I followed bands in the UK for a while. I ended up in advertising for a bit. And that was a very intentional switch to go from advertising to Greenpeace and really wanting to make sure that the work I'm doing aligns with my values.
Tell us a little bit. Gaslit is really taking us into the world of Texas and into Louisiana and seeing what's happening there in terms of the industry and the impacts on communities and individual lives.
Yeah, so, the Greenpeace work had me going all over, But I was really struck when I went down to Port Arthur, Texas. It's a place we visit in the film. It's where John Beard lives. He's featured in the film. And it's
Right.
right on the border of Texas and Louisiana. And I couldn't believe what I saw when I got down there. Like I didn't know what the Gulf Coast looked like, but I did not picture all of this polluting industry, all of the flares. And then when meeting people down there, it felt like everywhere you went, you just were hearing similar stories of, whether it's shrimpers and ranchers whose livelihood is at stake from all this industry expansion, whether it's the health impacts, the degradation of the environment. It was really shocking. Even, when the crew and I were down there, we couldn't drink the water at most places, which is not something that I understood was happening here in the US right now.
Wow. So are a number of the people that we meet in the film, are they people that you've met across that decade of work? Because I read that you made a lot of short social media videos around these issues. Is that right?
I have, but actually everyone I met for the first time, other than John Beard, who I met just before.
Mm-hmm.
But some of the people in the film, like Diane Wilson, this fisherwoman in Texas, had worked with previous people at Greenpeace. So they
Okay.
had been down there like in the 1990s with a video crew. And we actually unearthed a lot of footage that never got digitized that we use for this. And some of them were people who were like, oh my goodness, we just interviewed like this man Herbert in Louisiana who's nearing 100 years old, and we found footage of him from the 80s and 90s, and Greenpeace had been there before, which was really powerful to show, but was also, I don't know, it was also a little depressing, right? That these
Yeah.
issues are still happening and are worse now.
Yeah. So one of Diane's, the people who's become a friend of hers, is a rancher who sold off his land because it was just, and not an elegant word, trashed. I mean, it was just
Hmm.
being decimated by the industry. I mean, they were
Right.
both practically in tears when saying that they felt so horrible that the other was going through what they were going through. And otherwise, I mean, this was their deep connection, and it didn't matter that one might be more liberal in her politics and he more conservative. It was a deep, profound connection you felt, and it was subtle. It's not like in your face.
Oh, I'm glad that connected with you. Yes, it really is not a left or right issue. Once your water and your health and your livelihood is under threat, I mean, everyone can relate to that. And I do think that Diane Wilson and Johnny, who's the rancher, are a perfect example of that. And we saw it over and over again, including bringing Jane Fonda with us, and she's speaking to Republicans, and just as easy, she can connect with anyone across the spectrum, which might surprise some people. But I think when you watch the film, these are pretty unlikely allies, ranchers, shrimpers, and environmentalists.
Yeah. When did you start the process?
It's been just about exactly 3 years. So in
Wow.
early 2023, we got the idea. At the time, we were thinking maybe this would be a series of shorts online.
Hmm.
But pretty quickly, we're like, no, this is one story. And to really show people what the situation's like and to have audiences feel it, I think you need to meet all these people. So you can't
Hmm.
just write them off as like, oh, that's just one person. Some of the people worked for the industry quite proudly, the oil and gas industry, and even they're having these really serious issues with what's happening right now and how much worse it's gotten.
Yeah. So did your work take you to Germany when people from this wide region went to Germany? Give that nuance, because I think if you weren't aware of the fact that this region is connected with Germany, they didn't want to frack in Germany, but they were using what's being done in the States for their energy needs. Is that right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So it was really important for me to show this connection of how Europe and other countries, but especially Europe, is involved. So just like what you said, Germany, and in fact, most countries in Europe have banned fracking, but they're buying fracked gas from these pretty poor regions in the US. So there's a real hypocrisy there. And we wanted to bring over some people from the film and kind of have them see what it's like there. And also talk to people in Germany who mostly didn't know what was happening and didn't know like where in the supply chain this is coming from or how much it's
Sure.
hurting other people. You see in the film there's Juan Mancias from the Carrizo Como Crudo tribe of Texas is there, who's
Right.
indigenous, and he likens this exporting of our resources to gold and silver from the past. That this is a form of colonialism, is what he would say, because really we're having the negatives and they're just able to profit from it.
Yeah. So when the viewer takes this journey and visits the different communities and that have been so impacted, and in every case there was a small or a larger group of local people who have been pushing against this for, in many cases, decades, right? I would expect that people watching this film, pieces probably in different voices, are striking people in their own unique ways, are coming out, remembering a character or a sign or the many people who showed up in New Orleans. Talk about what happened in New Orleans.
Yeah, we sort of realized as we were talking to people, they were like, "Are you going to come film in New Orleans? We're going to do a big protest against that one specifically is about these liquefied natural gas, these LNG companies, and
Mm-hmm.
they have a big conference every year. And this year it was in New Orleans. And so many people from Texas and Louisiana were planning to be there that we realized, well, we've got to go too. So practically, yes, we had a number of camera people, our crew would tell me also this is like the most impactful thing they've worked on. So everyone, this was a labor of love. But yeah, I think we had, let's see, if you count the drone, probably four camera people there to try to cover it all. And what I like about that march is not only do you have the fishermen there, the community organizers, people from all walks of life, but there's also joy in that, with the music and there's some dancing. And I do want to show that in the film as well, because
Mm-hmm.
environmental docs are tough, we don't end with like a fake happy ending. There's some wins, like that woman Diane won a big lawsuit that now is being copied in other regions. So we show that progress is possible, but like resistance has to be joyful too. It's something that we want to invite people to join into. So I thought that was a really great way to see people connected with each other, having yeah, experiencing some joy.
So people will certainly want to know what it's like to work with Jane Fonda. Did she sort of like zoom in and spend a little time and then she was gone, or
I gotta say, Jane was there throughout.
was
So,
she? Oh, was she?
yeah, it was incredible. So that time I went to visit John Beard in Port Arthur, which started this, was actually for an episode of Fire Drill Fridays, which was a project that she and Greenpeace were working on, and I met her through that. And as we changed the project, as we expanded it, she's been supportive the whole way through. We had lots of prep meetings with her, and she was in the edit suite as well. And for the shooting, it was 3 weeks straight with her. So I had been a couple times before, we went sometimes after, but we did 3 weeks every day in a new place. She came with her big binder full of notes and dog-eared and questioning things and ready to go. And, she didn't want a day off. Every day she wanted to meet people, she wanted to film, she wanted to tell this story. And what a dream. I mean, it's my first feature film to direct, and having Jane's support throughout this, I mean, it's just so lucky.
Yeah. You've mentioned several people and scenes of the film, but is there a person or an element of the film that sticks with you?
Obviously, impossible to name just one,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I'll give you one for now, because otherwise it'll start to be as long as the film. But yeah, I mean, the one region that just felt like I was on a completely different planet was the Permian Basin in West Texas. So this is the largest drilling field in the United States, and we go there and we meet a woman named Sharon Wilson, and Sharon has a very high-end industrial level thermal camera. And with that, she can see the invisible emissions from all these facilities, including the methane, which is a big thing that we focus on. And from the first time she drove me around to every time I was there, I knew I would never forget this, because you look with your eye and you don't see anything. It's a beautiful day. It's Texas. The sun is out. Sometimes even the industry doesn't look as dramatic as other industry, and you think, oh, there's nothing wrong with that. And then you look through the camera and you just see huge clouds of methane. And that just really made me sick to my stomach. That just had a huge impact on me. And she gives lots of tours, but I know there's a limit to how many people she could bring. So we really tried to show that in the film. And not only being out there and seeing the emissions, but the Permian's also wild because everything is about the oil and gas industry. You know, the banks have on their time, temperature, and how many new wells are being drilled. You know,
Yeah.
we went to this museum there, petroleum museum, and they have like kids rides and games to feel like, you know, the different processes of drilling and what it feels like. And it just was really something different to see. So we start the film there, and I think people will be really stunned by it.
Yeah, it is. It is stunning and not in a beautiful way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know what's coming next for you? I mean, clearly you're spending time with this film in different places around the country, but what's next for you?
Yeah, so I right now we're working on our impact campaign, which, as you can probably imagine, with Greenpeace is pretty intense.
Mm-hmm.
So we're getting the film out there. It was just shown at an EU Parliament. We're working with the people in the film to make sure they can use it as a tool for their work. So I'm focused on all that right now. But then, you know, I love these kind of big issues, these social issues, and working with people across the political spectrum. So you know, there's a lot of issues right now that fit into that. So I'm looking at what's next.
Katie Camozzi is a Wisconsin native and the director of the film Gaslit, which is showing at the Milwaukee Film Festival. The first screening is on Friday, April 17th at the Downer Theater. Milwaukee Film is a financial supporter of WUWM. Conservationists are celebrating the return of sturgeon to the Milwaukee River, 20 miles upstream from Lake Michigan. It's the first time one of the giant fish was documented in Ozaukee County in more than a century. Sturgeon disappeared from the river because of things like overfishing and degraded habitat. The discovery of the sturgeon so far from Lake Michigan signals a milestone in a sturgeon restoration project that's been underway for 20 years. WUWM environmental reporter Susan Bentz is joined by Andrew Struck, the Director of Planning and Parks in Ozaukee County. He begins by describing the cameras that capture the sturgeon's historic journey.
The camera is immediately below us here at this culvert, and then we also have a overhead camera that you can see the actual fishway. But the underwater camera is in this culvert, and it's a kind of a pinch point for all migrating fish that are coming up the Milwaukee River. And then when they hit the Thiensville-Mequon Dam, they find their way over to our Nature Lake Fishway here and come through the fishway, and they have to pass through this culvert that we're standing on. So it's a little bit of a pinch point. Every single fish that comes past this point on the Milwaukee River has to pass through this culvert, and so we can get a really good count and image of those fish that are passing through.
Normally, this time of year, what might be passing through?
Some of the first runs are non-native fish, but sport fish. So some of the trout species, Chinook and steelhead and even rainbow trout are some of the first game fish that come kind of migrating. But we will start to see some of our other native fish now starting to migrate up. That means northern pike.
But what was special about March 30th?
March 30th was very special, really a historic day for a historic journey. We had the first adult male lake sturgeon come up from Lake Michigan and make it through the fishway here at Thiensville-Mequon, up past the fishway and past the dam for the first time in probably over 100 years. The sturgeon are back.
It is incredible because there's the restoration in and of itself and the fact that it's hooray.
Yes.
It's working.
It's working.
But it's also working because of the pathway that's been made to be more natural coming up from Lake Michigan to this spot.
Absolutely.
North Avenue Dam.
Yes. Yeah, we've so many partners, so much effort over, frankly, 2 decades. So making that passage, that journey possible. North Avenue Dam, Kletch Dam, Estabrook Dam, in Milwaukee County, those efforts. And then our efforts here at Thiensville-Mequon Dam with the fishway that was constructed in 2009 and 10, and then reconstructed with the idea of making it even more suitable for passage by Lake Sturgeon. And
it worked.
There was a question, but now we have absolute confirmation that Lake Sturgeon can make it all the way up. And so they will be able to make it up here to Ozaukee County and hopefully find their native spawning grounds.
So what made it more suitable, more inviting for sturgeon?
Well, I think first of all was the reintroduction itself. So bringing sturgeon back to the Milwaukee River has been a two plus decade process.
Coordinated primarily through River Edge Nature Center and the DNR?
That's correct. Yes, DNR and River Edge Nature Center established back in 2006-ish, established a streamside rearing for lake sturgeon.
Their own little trailer.
Their own little trailer, their own little hatchery. And why is that important? Because sturgeon, like a lot of our other native fish, are attracted to the chemical composition of the water where they were born. And so they have an olfactory sense, if you will, a native sense for the water, the chemical makeup of the water where they were born, and have a natural strong instinct to get back to that same tributary. And so the streamside rearing used Milwaukee River and the natural chemicals in the rearing trailer. So they actually would take Milwaukee River and pump it through the streamside rearing station or trailer to raise the fish. So they had that chemical imprint on them when they were reintroduced. So over the last 20 years or so, the DNR, River Edge, and many other volunteers have been not only rearing but then stocking the sturgeon back as part of Sturgeon Fest.
They're about to hit their 20th anniversary, right?
They're about to hit their 20th anniversary, and what better way to celebrate? Absolutely.
So just to clarify, when you say chemicals, you're not meaning the chemicals are being added. You're saying it's the
the natural
profile of that water.
Yeah, the natural water's chemistry from the natural water. So again, we just see a little mink coming into the fishway.
What I want to see...
He's hunting.
So what I want to see is a sturgeon.
Yes.
We can't leave until we see a sturgeon.
I'll have to show you on the video. You won't be able to see it from the top side, but you can see it on OzaukieFishway.org. You can see the underwater camera, and there is a clip of the first male sturgeon, 50 plus inches long, passing through the fishway here at Thiensville-Mequon Dam. Yes.
Tell us who that sturgeon was and more about him.
Very good point. So in addition to the underwater camera, we actually have what are called pit tag readers, passive integrated transponding readers. So each lake sturgeon, when they're reared, they get a little tag. It's very similar to the tag that's put in our pets that you can read with a chip reader. And each one of the sturgeon, when they're reared, gets a pit tag. And then we have pit tag readers all along the Milwaukee River now, but one of the first ones was put in here at Thiensville-Mequon that lays in the bottom of the fishway and can detect that when they swim over it. So they can detect that chip. That chip has a unique ID number, and so we know that unique fish, and we can tell when it was stocked. In this case, that male was stocked in 2011, right here at Thiensville-Mequon in Thiensville Park. And so, 15-year-old male, mature and coming up. And, the unique thing about sturgeon is they take a while to get to sexual maturity. So 15 years is probably on the early end of that. So very, very positive sign. That would be
He's raring to go.
He's raring to go. That would be the first, the sign that we would see the males coming back. And the females take a little bit longer to hit sexual maturity. So unfortunately, he may be making this journey and not find a partner, but we're hopeful that maybe there are also some female sturgeons coming up. But generally speaking, we know that the females take a little bit longer to make their journey.
So how much further upstream can they travel at this point?
So we're at roughly river mile 20, I believe, here at the Thiensville Dam, and they can go up to the Bridge Street Dam in the village of Grafton. So I believe that is right around river mile 30 or so. So that's the mileage from Lake Michigan. So up to the village of Grafton.
So they can't quite make it up to River Edge.
They can't make it back to River Edge, but they do have that same sense of the water.
That sense of home.
That sense of home. And a whole host of partners, again, have contributed to this success over 2 decades. But One thing that we're very hopeful for is actually now being able to have successful spawning habitat for those sturgeon. And one of our other projects here in Ozaukee County was the removal of the lime kiln dam in the village of Grafton, which is accessible, so they can get up to that area. And what makes that special for spawning sturgeon is it's fractured bedrock in that reach of the Milwaukee River. And it's got higher velocities, but not too high. And so we believe, yet to be confirmed, but we believe that might be really ideal sturgeon spawning habitat in that reach by lime kiln. And what made that possible was the dam removal that we did there in 2011-12.
I was going to say that was a while ago.
It was a while ago. So all of these steps have been leading up to the day.
That was WUWM environmental reporter Susan Bentz speaking with Andrew Struck, the Planning and Parks Director for Ozaukee County. We'll take one more break, and when we return, we'll learn how the keyboards we type on every day are connected to Milwaukee. That's next on Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM. This is Lake Effect on Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. Most of us use a keyboard every day, whether it's on a computer, phone, or tablet. But did you know that the keyboard was invented right here in Milwaukee? T. Krulos and Molly Schneider joined Lake Effect's Joy Powers to share the history of the QWERTY keyboard.
How did this keyboard come to life? Why was it created?
Well, there's a Milwaukee inventor named Christopher Latham Scholes, and he developed one of the first early prototypes of the typewriter, the one that we still associate with the shape and style today. And he was working on a key configuration, and he came up with the QWERTY keyboard 150 years ago. And it's still the keyboard that we use today on computers, iPhones, whatever typing device that you're using.
Now, I think a lot of people are going to be familiar with the QWERTY keyboard. I would be a little surprised if anyone was unfamiliar with it. But my dad used to talk about this all the time. He was a left-hander, and one of the things he would say is the reason why we have the QWERTY keyboard is it's meant to slow people down. Why were they trying to do that? I guess that's the question.
I think part of the reason is because it was laid out that way so that keys wouldn't jam. Because if they were in a certain place and you were typing too fast, the keys could jam up. So this way, with the layout and also the suggestive of a slower type, that would again make the hammers, hit the ribbon slower and therefore not jam up as much.
Another thing I've heard, too, is that if you look at the first row, you can spell the word typewriter on it. So there is a story that this made it easy for typewriter salesmen to type out that word. But, I've heard different things about the keyboard, and I'm not sure how much of it is true and how much is maybe like lore about it, but it could be either way.
One of the enduring questions I've had is, why do we continue to use it? Because it isn't exactly the most comprehensive of keyboard designs. I've seen others that I went, I might be able to type a little faster on that one.
I think it's just, it was invented that way, and manufacturers just passed it on, from one style of machine to the next, just because it was so familiar, and it was a layout that had already been completed.
Yeah, I think it's tradition, and it's being comfortable with the keyboard. I mean, it's not the only keyboard out there. There are other keyboards, but this has always been the fallback, the go-to, and the one that seemingly, even in today's world, where we don't have to worry about the hammers jamming and not hitting, the ribbons, we don't have to worry about that anymore. It still seems to be the most comfortable keyboard for people, more out of, again, tradition and practice than, the way that the keys are laid out.
Now, I think we've seen this kind of revival of the love of typewriters. What do you think is behind that?
There's certain things about using a typewriter that's different than using a laptop or something like that. there is that more deliberate thought that has to go into what you're doing. One thing I love about it is there aren't the distractions that I face. So if I'm working on an article sometimes, I'll maybe have 10 tabs open and I'm hearing Facebook notifications and there's pop-ups and all sorts of stuff. But here it's really just your brain and the page together working on something. And there's a really great percussive feeling. And there's this sort of a romantic vision of typewriters. If you think about your favorite old school writers behind their typewriter clacking away on these brilliant ideas that they have. I think all that's very appealing, and it's an old technology that's fun, kind of like vinyl records or stuff like that.
It really slows down the writing process. And just in general, with vinyl, it's the same thing. Like, you have to get up, you have to change the record, you have to flip the record. It's the same thing, you have to, with a typewriter, you have to put a piece of paper into the carriage, you have to wind it, you have to sit and think a little bit before you type a word because you want to make sure it's not as easy to delete. There's all these things that slow down the process. And, it's a cliche now to say this, but, everything's moving so fast with technology. It's really nice to slow things down and to be forced to slow things down. And to be able to just revel more in the process of writing rather than just getting, 2,000 words out onto a page.
Sure. Well, T, Molly, thank you both so much for joining us here on Lake Effect.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Molly Snyder is a senior writer for On Milwaukee, and T. Krulos is a Milwaukee writer and author. And that wraps up Lake Effect for today. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. If you've missed any of Lake Effect this week, you can find all of our conversations at wuwm.com. If you'd like to take the show on the go, you can download the Lake Effect podcast wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. Tomorrow on Lake Effect, we'll share some of our favorite stories from the week, including the news that Wisconsin's most popular state park is expanding. Thank you so much for joining us today, right here on listener-supported 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR.